Ever find yourself wondering how our brains hold on to memories? And I'm not just talking about remembering facts, but those full-on sensory flashbacks, like you're reliving a moment. That's what we're diving into today, that wild world of how our brains make and remake memories.
It's easy to imagine our memories as these perfect recordings all tucked away in our minds, but the source material we're looking at today suggests something a lot more dynamic is going on.
Yeah, this excerpt from self102121.pdf totally changed my perspective.
Oh, really?
It argues we don't just recall an object, but our whole interaction with it.
Interesting.
So it's not apple, it's the feel of the peel, that tart smell the crunch when you bite into it.
You've hit on a key point. It's multisensory, almost like your brain is reliving the experience physically. It explains why a certain smell can instantly catapult you back to a childhood memory. Your brain is reactivating a whole network of sensations.
So it's less like a snapshot and more like our brains are pulling up files from different senses all at once, creating a richer memory.
Try to picture your childhood bedroom.
Okay.
You probably don't see a crystal clear picture, right?
Yeah.
Instead, it's more of a blend of impressions. The rough texture of the carpet, the faint scent of your old toys, maybe even the sound of your creaky ceiling fan.
And those sensory details are almost like bookmarks, letting our brains jump back to that specific point in time.
Exactly.
But if our brains held on to every little detail, wouldn't they get overloaded?
Absolutely. Storing every sensation in perfect detail would take an immense amount of brain power. Our brains have evolved to be incredibly efficient. So instead, they seem to rely on these triggers, these key sensory cues, to bring back the whole picture.
That makes a lot of sense. So how does the brain actually do that? How does it turn those scattered sensory cues into a coherent memory?
That's where things get really intriguing.
Okay.
This source delves into the concept of dispositions, which act as the brain's own coding system for reconstructing experiences.
All right, let's unpack this whole dispositions thing, because it sounds pretty complex.
Okay.
Yeah.
Imagine them as blueprints for memories.
Okay.
Instead of storing a massive file with every single detail of an experience, your brain stores a recipe.
So instead of remembering every sight, sound, and feeling of seeing your grandmother, your brain stores a grandmother recipe that it can use to recreate those sensations. That's wild.
It's a compelling way to think about it. And this recipe isn't just a random list of ingredients.
Right.
It's a structured system with connections and associations that give the memory its richness and detail.
Okay, so it's like our brain creates a shorthand version of the memory and uses that to rebuild the experience on demand.
Exactly.
It's incredibly efficient, but also kind of makes you wonder, how accurate are our memories if they're being reconstructed every time we access them?
That's a great question, and it's something we'll be exploring in more detail throughout this deep dive.
Okay.
Because if our memories are like recipes, then what are the ingredients? And what happens if those ingredients change over time?
This is already making me question everything I thought I knew about how my own memory works.
You're right to be curious about the accuracy of our memories. It's not a perfect system. This source describes it more like baking. Even if you follow the same recipe, the final product can vary depending on subtle differences each time.
So every time we recall a memory, we're essentially rebaking it in our brains with slightly different results each time.
That's the fascinating implication.
Wow.
And just like with baking, those subtle variations can add up over time, especially when you consider the influence of our current emotions and experiences.
That makes sense. A memory that felt happy and carefree years ago might take on a different tone if you're looking back on it during a difficult time.
Exactly. Our present state of mind acts as a filter, shaping how we perceive and interpret those past experiences. It's one reason why eyewitness testimonies can be unreliable. Our brains aren't impartial recording devices. They're constantly making sense of information, even if it means filling in gaps or adapting to new perspectives.
This explains why siblings sometimes have totally different memories of the same childhood event, or how couples can end up arguing about something that happened years ago.
Precisely. It underscores how subjective memory truly is.
Yeah.
But this isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Oh.
The source actually highlights the adaptive value of this flexibility.
Adaptive? You mean there's a benefit to our memories being, well, a little bit fuzzy around the edges?
Think about it. If our memories were perfectly preserved snapshots, we might struggle to learn from our mistakes or adapt to new information. Our brains have evolved to be flexible, integrating new experiences and knowledge over time.
So instead of being trapped by rigid recollections, our brains are constantly evolving alongside us. That's actually a comforting thought.
It's a testament to the remarkable capacity of our brains.
Yeah.
But this idea of a dynamic memory system does raise some interesting questions.
Like what?
Remember those grandmother cells we often hear about?
You mean the idea that there's one specific neuron in our brain dedicated to remembering our grandmother?
Exactly.
Okay.
This source challenges that notion, suggesting it's not about a single neuron, but rather a vast network of neural activity that allows us to recall someone as significant as our grandmother.
So instead of one neuron shouting grandma, it's more like a whole team of neurons firing together.
That's a great way to put it. It's the combined activity of various regions in the brain, each responsible for different aspects of the memory, that creates the full, rich experience of remembering someone so important to us.
So while there might not be a single dedicated grandmother cell, the core concept still holds certain neurons fire more strongly when we encounter something familiar and meaningful.
It's this intricate dance between individual neurons and complex networks that allows our brains to hold on to such a vast and diverse range of memories.
It really makes you appreciate just how much is going on beneath the surface, even with a seemingly simple act of remembering.
And this understanding, while complex, opens up new avenues for research.
Oh, how so?
Imagine if we could understand these networks well enough to develop therapies for individuals with memory disorders.
It's incredible to think that by unraveling the mysteries of memory, we might be able to help people reclaim lost memories, or even mitigate the effects of conditions like Alzheimer's.
It's a compelling area of research.
For sure.
But for now, let's bring it back to everyday life. What does it mean for us knowing our memories aren't perfect recordings?
Well, for one, it might make us a little more understanding when someone remembers a shared experience differently. It's not necessarily about someone being wrong, but rather how our individual perspectives shape our recollections.
It's a good reminder to approach disagreements with a bit of empathy and understanding, especially when it comes to recalling past events.
Right.
Our brains are always striving for coherence, and sometimes that means adjusting our memories to fit new information or emotional states.
It's a humbling thought, realizing our memories are more like ever-evolving narratives than fixed points in time.
Definitely.
But if they're so fluid, what about the possibility of memories being deliberately influenced, even manipulated? That's a thought-provoking concept this source also touches upon.
It's a crucial aspect of memory research, and one that carries significant ethical implications.
Yeah.
We've established that memories aren't infallible, but could they be intentionally altered?
Right.
That's a question we'll need to delve into further.
So we're back to this idea that our memories can be intentionally influenced, even manipulated. That's a bit unsettling, to say the least. Where do we even begin to unpack that?
It's definitely a complex issue, but the source material highlights one key factor. Because memories are reconstructed each time we access them, they're inherently susceptible to subtle influences.
Okay, so every time we revisit a memory, we're essentially hitting save on a slightly edited version. And those edits, even unintentional ones, can be shaped by outside factors.
Precisely. Imagine trying to recall a conversation with a friend. Now, suppose that right before you try to remember it, someone mentions a detail that might or might not have been part of that original conversation.
You're saying that new detail could sneak its way into my memory, even if it wasn't originally there. Almost like a game of telephone happening inside my brain.
It's a well-documented phenomenon called the Misinformation Effect.
Wow.
And it demonstrates how easily our memories can be swayed, even without us realizing it.
That's a little unnerving. It's one thing to forget details, but to completely remember things that never actually happened. That's a whole other level.
And it gets even more complicated when you factor in the powerful influence of our emotions on memory.
Right, because strong emotions tend to make memories more vivid, more easily recalled. But you're suggesting they can also make them more prone to distortion.
Think about it. Our brains are wired to prioritize emotionally charged information. It's a survival mechanism helping us remember threats or positive experiences. But that often comes at the expense of accuracy when it comes to the finer details.
So if I'm remembering an argument, my anger in the moment might make the memory more intense years later, but also potentially less accurate.
That's the crux of it. It's why two people can have such drastically different recollections of the same event, particularly if it was emotionally charged. Our brains latch on to the emotional core of an experience, and the details can become muddled over time.
This entire conversation is making me rethink everything I thought I knew about my own memories.
And that's the beauty of exploring these topics in depth. It challenges our assumptions and opens up new ways of understanding how our minds operate.
Okay, so we've established that our memories can be unreliable narrators, influenced by a whole host of factors we might not even be aware of. But what about intentional manipulation? Is that something we should genuinely be concerned about?
It's a valid concern, especially as our understanding of the brain grows and technologies develop that can influence our perceptions and even potentially our memories directly.
Okay, now we're getting into some pretty sci-fi territory. Are you saying our memories could be, like, hacked?
We're not quite at the point of downloading or altering memories like in the movies, but there are certainly methods, even if rudimentary, that have been explored for implanting false memories or suppressing existing ones.
This is fascinating, but also a little terrifying. How would someone even begin to manipulate someone else's memory so deliberately?
One method is through suggestion, particularly within therapeutic settings. A therapist, even unintentionally, can guide a patient to recover memories that never actually occurred.
Like those stories you hear about people recovering repressed memories that later turn out to be false.
Exactly. It highlights the immense responsibility that comes with delving into the complexities of memory. The potential for harm is very real.
Absolutely. But what about outside of a therapeutic context? What about things like propaganda or even targeted advertising? Can those subtly influence our memories over time?
While they might not directly implant specific memories, they can shape our beliefs and perceptions, which in turn influence how we recall and interpret past events. It's a subtle but powerful form of influence.
So even if we're not consciously aware of it, our memories are constantly bombarded with information that can subtly alter them over time.
Think of it like this. Our understanding of the world is constantly evolving. New information comes to light, our beliefs change, and our memories adapt to accommodate these shifts in perspective.
It's both fascinating and a bit unsettling. If our memories are so fluid, so susceptible to change, how can we be sure of anything we remember?
That's a question philosophers have grappled with for centuries. And while we might not have a definitive answer, this understanding of memory's malleable nature encourages us to be more critical thinkers, to question our own recollections and be open to different perspectives.
You know, for all the potential downsides, there's something strangely liberating about knowing that our memories aren't these set-in-stone recordings.
It reminds us that our personal narratives are constantly being written and rewritten. It's a testament to the incredible adaptability and complexity of the human brain.
On that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. My brain is officially at capacity.
As is mine. But it's been a fascinating exploration as always.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of human memory. We've covered a lot of ground, from the intricate ways our brains store and retrieve information to the surprising malleability of our recollections.
The biggest takeaway is this. Your memories are yours. They're shaped by your experiences, your emotions, your unique perspective on the world.
Cherish them, question them, and never stop exploring the incredible landscape of your own mind. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.